What if I told you that you could pass the newest, highly coveted AWS Artificial Intelligence certification without writing a single line of code?
Sounds almost too good to be true, right?
Right. And get this, you could even completely bomb one of the most difficult sections on the test and still walk away certified.
Yeah, that part is wild.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are opening up the official AWS Certified AI Practitioner exam guide.
Specifically, the AIF-C01.
Exactly, the AIF-C01. And our mission here is to extract the exact blueprint of this certification. We want to look under the hood to help you understand what it actually takes to pass.
Traps you really need to avoid.
Yes, and ultimately figure out whether this credential actually aligns with your own career path. Because whether you are, actively prepping for this specific exam, or you're just trying to catch up on how the industry measures AI literacy.
Or honestly, if you're just insanely curious about what tech giants expect from the modern workforce.
Right. Whatever your reason, we are breaking down the source material for you today.
Yeah. The AIF-C01 guide, it's far more than just a syllabus for a test. I mean, when a major cloud provider like Amazon Web Services creates a foundational certification, they're essentially publishing a manifesto.
Oh, I like that word, a manifesto.
Yeah, because they're telegraphing exactly what skills they believe are critical for the immediate future of business. It's really a reflection of where the entire cloud ecosystem is heading over the next few years.
Well, looking closely at the target candidate description in this guide, the profile they paint is incredibly specific. AWS states that the ideal candidate should have up to 6 months of exposure to AI and machine learning technologies on their platform.
Just 6 months.
Just 6 months. But they draw this very hard line in the sand. They say the candidate uses, but does not necessarily build AI and ML solutions.
That's the crucial distinction.
Right. And they list the core services you need to know. Like, you have to understand Amazon EC2, Amazon S3, AWS Lambda.
And of course, Amazon SageMaker AI and Amazon Bedrock.
Exactly. Those are the big ones.
We really need to define how those specific tools interact, though, because that is the crux of the whole use versus build philosophy.
Yeah, lay that out for us.
So you have Amazon S3, right, which is essentially the massive digital warehouse for your unstructured data. Then you have Amazon EC2 providing the raw computational muscle, the virtual servers.
Heavy lifting.
Exactly. And then AWS Lambda is acting as the event-driven nervous system, running snippets of code in response to triggers completely without you having to provision those servers.
Okay, but the real heavyweights for this exam,
Yeah.
is SageMaker and Bedrock. And knowing the difference between the two is critical for this test.
Oh, absolutely.
Because SageMaker is the environment where you would historically go to custom build, train, and deploy your own machine learning models. It's a deeply technical workbench.
Right. It's for the builders.
But then Bedrock, on the other hand, is a fully managed service that gives you API access to pre-built massive foundation models, like from companies like Anthropic, Meta, and obviously Amazon itself.
And that architectural distinction is everything here, because the exam guide is totally explicit about what is out of scope.
Yeah, tell them what they don't have to do.
You are not expected to develop or code the algorithms. You do not need to implement data engineering pipelines. And performing hyperparameter tuning.
Which is where you are mathematically tweaking the learning rate of a model, right?
Exactly. All that mathematical tweaking is completely off the table. They are evaluating if you know when to use Bedrock for a generative text solution versus when to use SageMaker for a custom predictive model.
Without requiring you to actually engineer either of them from scratch.
Right.
It sounds like AWS wants you to be the skilled driver of a high-tech sports car, not the mechanic building the engine from scratch.
That is a great way to look at it.
But wait, I have to push back here. If a candidate has only 6 months of exposure, is that really enough time to understand complex tools like Bedrock or SageMaker alongside intricate IAM security policies?
That is the big question.
Because it just seems fast, right?
What's fascinating here is that the industry is experiencing a massive bottleneck, and this certification is the direct response to that bottleneck.
How so?
Well, we have access to these incredibly powerful APIs now, right? We don't need thousands of data scientists manually coding neural networks anymore.
We just need to know how to plug them in.
Yes. We need product managers, business analysts, and operational leaders who can look at a business problem and securely integrate that technology.
Going back to Bedrock, using it is less like building a synthetic brain from the ground up and more like hiring a brilliantly smart intern who has read the entire internet.
But it has absolutely no idea what your specific company actually does.
Exactly. So the certification is testing your ability to give that intern the right employee handbook, which is your company data sitting in S3, and ensuring they don't leak it to the public.
That's the governance piece.
Right. But let's be real. If a business analyst with only 6 months of casual exposure is given the keys to Amazon Bedrock, alongside complex security policies like AWS Identity and Access Management or IAM,
Which can be incredibly complex.
right, aren't we just asking for a massive data leak? Giving someone the power to deploy foundation models before they understand the underlying infrastructure
Yeah.
feels incredibly risky.
Well, it is risky if they lack the governance piece, which is exactly why IAM and the AWS shared responsibility model are heavily featured in the prerequisites.
Okay, so they do test for that.
Absolutely. AWS is trying to mandate a baseline of operational security. They are saying that if you are going to leverage our foundation models, you must prove you know how to lock down the S3 bucket where your proprietary data lives.
So they secure the cloud, but you secure what's in the cloud.
Exactly. You have to understand that while AWS secures the physical servers in the network, you are completely responsible for who has access to the data flowing into the prompt.
Okay, so that leads me to my next point. If AWS doesn't want to test your ability to build the engine, but they urgently need to test your ability to drive the car securely, how do they actually measure that?
It's tricky without coding, for sure.
Right, because traditional technical exams lean heavily on reading and writing code snippets. So I was looking at the scoring model and the anatomy of the exam.
It's a scaled model up to 1,000 points.
Yeah, and you need a 700 to pass. But the structural part that actually relieved my anxiety was this compensatory scoring idea.
Oh, the compensatory scoring model is a massive safety net.
Explain how that works for us.
Basically, it means that you do not need to achieve a passing score in every single individual section of the exam. You only need to cross that 700-point threshold overall.
That is a huge relief.
It really is. When you receive your score report, it classifies your performance at each section level to show your strengths and weaknesses. But mathematically, a deep expertise in one domain can literally compensate for a glaring deficit in another.
So you could completely bomb the technical fundamentals of how transformers work. But if you have a rock-solid background in IT security and compliance, you can scoop up enough points there to still walk away certified.
Exactly. You can play to your strengths.
But before we get to those specific domains, we have to talk about the psychological thriller hidden in the format.
You mean the unscored questions?
Yes. Wait, 15 secret questions that don't even count toward your score? That sounds like a psychological thriller for test takers.
I know it sounds intense.
There are 65 questions total. 50 are scored, and 15 are unscored beta questions mixed in blindly. You could be sitting there agonizing over an incredibly complex scenario, wasting precious minutes, and it might not even be a real question.
Well, it is a rigorous format, but this raises an important point about how tech giants calibrate their standards. I mean, standardized testing at this scale requires constant evolution.
So it's basically a test within a test.
Exactly. Those 15 unscored items are how AWS evaluates candidate performance on new concepts. They're gathering telemetry to ensure a question is fair, structurally sound, and properly calibrated before it ever affects someone's actual score in future iterations.
Okay, that makes sense. But even if we accept the beta testing reality, I am looking at the question formats themselves. It is not just multiple choice.
No, they use a few different formats.
Right. They have multiple response, where you have to select 2 or 3 correct answers out of 5. And if you miss one, you lose the whole point.
Yeah, partial credit isn't a thing there.
But the ones that genuinely test your architectural logic without requiring code are the ordering and matching questions.
The ordering format is a brilliant way to test workflow comprehension. I mean, you might be given a list of 4 operational steps.
Give me an example of that.
So for example, assign an IAM role, point Bedrock to an S3 bucket, configure a vector database, and deploy the application. You must place them in the exact sequential order to build a secure knowledge base.
So you aren't writing the Python script to execute it.
Right, but you have to understand the causal chain of operations.
Okay, so knowing that the scoring is compensatory and knowing how they test the logic means you have to strategize exactly where the points are hiding.
Absolutely, strategy is key.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If AWS weights these sections deliberately to reflect what a real-world business needs, we need to look at how they prioritize these skills.
And the blueprint gives us 5 distinct content domains.
Yes. Let's reveal that blueprint.
We should break down the percentage weightings because they tell a very clear story about the modern AI lifecycle. Domain 1 covers the fundamentals of AI and ML at 20%.
Okay, 20%.
Domain 2 is the fundamentals of generative AI at 24%. Domain 3 is applications of foundation models, representing the largest chunk at 28%.
Wow, 28%.
Domain 4 is guidelines for responsible AI at 14%. And Domain 5 is security, compliance, and governance for AI solutions, also at 14%.
Let's focus on Domain 1 for a second. 20% dedicated to traditional AI and machine learning fundamentals. This is where I think a lot of people chasing the generative AI hype might stumble.
Oh, absolutely. They expect the whole test to be about chatbots.
Right. But AWS wants you to know the difference between traditional ML-like predicting customer churn using historical data and generative AI.
Because a business leader cannot effectively solve problems if they think every problem requires a generative foundation model.
Right. You don't use a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Exactly. Sometimes you just need a standard regression model in SageMaker to analyze your sales data. So Domain 1 tests whether you know the difference between supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning.
You have to know the proper tool for this specific job. But then we look at the separation between Domain 2 and Domain 3. This is huge.
Yeah, AWS splits generative AI into 2 massive distinct blocks.
Right. Domain 2 is fundamentals, worth 24%. Domain 3 is applications, worth 28%. It's like spending less time learning the chemistry of how paint is mixed and dedicating all your focus to how to actually paint a masterpiece on the canvas.
That division is the core thesis of the entire certification. Domain 2 tests your understanding of concepts like tokens, context windows, and the difference between a large language model and a diffusion model.
The theory.
Right. But Domain 3 is where the rubber meets the road. It tests architectural implementation. How do you take that foundation model and ground it in your company's reality?
Taking that a step further, Domain 3 is where you get tested on techniques like RAG retrieval augmented generation versus fine-tuning.
That is a critical comparison.
Going back to our intern metaphor, if your Bedrock intern doesn't know your latest pricing sheet, you have 2 choices. You can either force the intern to memorize a massive stack of new textbooks, which is incredibly expensive and time-consuming.
Which represents fine-tuning.
Exactly. Or you can just put a highly organized filing cabinet on their desk and say, look in here before you answer any questions. And that is RAG.
And an AWS Certified Practitioner needs to know that RAG is almost always the faster, more cost-effective choice for a business trying to prevent AI hallucinations.
You don't need to write the embedding algorithms that convert the text into vectors for the database.
Right, but you absolutely must know that setting up an Amazon Bedrock knowledge base using RAG is the architectural solution to that business problem.
Which brings us to the final 2 domains. Domain 4 is responsible AI, sitting at 14%. And Domain 5 is security, compliance, and governance, also at 14%.
Some people might overlook these.
I have to admit, when I first looked at this, I assumed these were the obligatory corporate compliance sections. You know, the dry material you skim right before the test.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a mathematical reality hidden in those weightings that proves AWS does not view this as optional corporate fluff.
Yeah, break down the math for us.
Look at the numbers. Domain 4 is 14%, Domain 5 is 14%. If you combine responsible AI with security and governance, it equals 28% of your total score.
Which is the exact same weight as Domain 3, the applications of foundation models.
Exactly. This is how AWS views the current landscape. In their architecture, effectively using an AI model is entirely inseparable from securely governing it.
They carry the exact same weight.
They do. They are telling the market that knowing how to spin up a foundation model is worse than useless if you do not equally understand the guardrails, the legal compliance, and the data privacy requirements that keep that application from becoming a massive corporate liability.
But, you know, my concern with that is how you actually test responsible AI objectively. I mean, security is easy to test. You either configure the IAM role correctly or you didn't. But ethics...
It feels subjective, right?
Yeah. How does a multiple choice exam grade you on fairness?
Well, they test it through operational guardrails. It is not a philosophy test. It is an implementation test.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, AWS has a tool called Guardrails for Amazon Bedrock. The exam will test your ability to configure a guardrail to detect and redact personally identifiable information, or PII, before it ever reaches the foundation model.
Okay, see.
It tests your knowledge of how to filter out harmful content or block prompt injection attacks. It is objective because you are selecting the specific AWS feature designed to mitigate the ethical or security risk.
Okay, so you cannot just rely on the AI vendor to be ethical on your behalf. You have to
Mhm.
implement the filters on your end of the API.
Absolutely.
And again, leaning on the compensatory scoring we talked about, this is a massive opportunity. If you are someone coming from a traditional IT audit, legal compliance, or cloud security background,
You might not know the intricate details of vector embeddings yet.
right, but you can heavily leverage your existing knowledge of the AWS shared responsibility model and data governance to capture over a quarter of the exam points.
It really allows professionals from highly regulated industries like healthcare, finance, government to validate that they can bring their operational rigor into the AI space.
Because the industry needs their oversight just as much as it needs the developers.
Without a doubt.
So we set out to extract the blueprint of the AIF-C01, and the landscape we've uncovered is completely different from the traditional tech certification.
It really is a shift.
AWS is deliberately moving away from testing your ability to manually forge the pistons and intensely focusing on your ability to navigate the vehicle without crashing it into a wall.
It validates practical intuition over deep engineering. I mean, knowing when to use Amazon Bedrock, how to architect a RGES solution to save costs.
And fundamentally, how to lock down the data pipelines using IAM.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? It means the barrier to entry for the artificial intelligence industry is fundamentally shifting.
The era of AI being exclusively reserved for mathematicians and back-end engineers is ending.
Tech giants are acknowledging that the tools are already built. The new priority is finding the adults in the room who can apply them to actual business problems responsibly.
It is a democratization of the technology, but it comes with a strict demand for accountability. You don't have to code the model, but you absolutely own the consequences of deploying it.
And that leaves us with a provocative reality to consider as we wrap up. If foundational certifications from massive cloud providers are now explicitly stripping out the coding, bypassing the statistical mathematics, and ignoring the infrastructure building,
Yeah.
are we approaching a future where working in AI is less about writing the algorithms and almost entirely about intelligently managing and governing the black boxes that others have built?
It's definitely a huge paradigm shift.
Something to mull over as you map out your career in the cloud. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the tech, and we'll see you next time.